Hello, and welcome to this tour of the Bartlett Summer 2020 the summer show. Um, I'm Owen. I'm a first year student in the Bartlett. Um, I'm going to be looking at work in the Bartlett that uses what I've called excessive expression, so kind of exaggerated forms of drawing and exaggerated processes in the projects and the proposals that people are putting forward from the Bartlett. Maximalism is something that is often frowned upon in architecture, and minimalism seems to be king. But it has always held a strong position in the Bartlett, and quite maximalist and intense and dense projects have always managed to strive through in the school. I'll start with my own work in the first year. This year, we were given sites in Dalston in North London for our building project. The site in particular for me was located here along Ridley Road Market and between the market stalls and the train line. It's a very complex site. There's been a lot of issues with gentrification in Ridley Road Market in particular, with 3 sites in which the market stalls for the market are being stored. So the market has quite an uncertain future, all surrounding the storage of what makes it work, its market stalls. So the project starts by trying to address this, not directly in the building, but instead by creating an alternate context. So also in response to the railway's links to the freight docks in Felixstowe and London Gateway, and historically to East London, I took 10 cranes and placed them along the embankment of the railway, and it's creating this urban dockyard. So the building then sits into this alternate context, with cranes swinging containers back and forth over the railway. This obviously is not a realistic proposal, but through kind of accepting the fantastical reality of a student project and the fact that it will always be a piece of paper architecture and it will never exist truly as a buildable building, I was able to express a quite contentious and complex issue in the market without pretending to try and solve it, but instead by simply addressing it with quite a bold and sweeping statement. So the building is sitting within these cranes, and the building itself is also quite excessively expressed, with 4 gantries lurching out over the railway with pods that can plug in from the cranes for train spotters. The programme of the building itself is a clubhouse for a series of train spotters, the Association of Enthusiasts of the North London Line. It's run by a guardian called Alan, and Alan lives in a pod here that extrudes out the section of which is copied from a double-decker train. And his living pod here extrudes out over the railway, giving him views down onto the railway. A lot of the project focuses on that kind of relationship with trains and that relationship of scale with the railway. Train spotters love the idea that as a train wishes past them, there's a larger network outside of them. So the building takes this to another level. You first enter on a very intimate level with the trains just above their roofs, and you enter up into the building, and you're elevated once more, and you can start to see from a bridge that's in the east to a tunnel in the west. But you can go further up to this tower, and up on this tower, you're able to see Canonbury in the west and Hackney Central in the east. And this kind of bold statement also acts as a signal to the market of the railway. From the market, you have no idea the railway's there, so suddenly you're aware of this through this tower. The project the drawings themselves are also trying to reflect the context of the site. They're drawn with a density and intensity that Ridley Road Market really does hold, something that is often ignored in architecture and replaced with tastes that are somewhat cleaner. But the daily life of Ridley Road Market is the true contemporary London. It's the true contemporary architecture that lives around us. Just because it's not permanent doesn't mean that it shouldn't be respected and referenced. So the drawing is filled with lines, all the construction lines begin to merge together in this composite drawing of axiometrics and sections and plans, mixed with a storyboard of bright colours and quite intense textures. The style of the building is clearly referencing a 60s high tech, and the collage is referencing kind of 90s and early noughties aesthetics, both eras of quite intense optimism for future and technology, something that is definitely lacking today. And the building is trying to tap into this excitement of future, this excitement for technology, and this excitement that the enthusiasts have for the railway. The interior of the building was mostly designed in this 1:20 planned section, drawing the size of a wall. Took me 3 weeks to create. And because of its scale, it ended up being a construction in itself. Every nut and bolt has to be drawn in at that scale. Every beam, every stair, everything has to be designed and everything has to be thought of. And because of the scale of the drawing, there was kind of a need to fill it, with objects, which results in this very thin and tall corridor, this kind of canyon of objects, of railway memorabilia. And it results in this quite intensive interior perspective, with bright colors and people walking up and about you. All this is to say that this is something that is again often ignored in architecture. People want spaces to be clean, they want to be free of clutter. This space is instead intended to come alive with clutter. It exists purely with clutter, and it wouldn't be the same building without it. I'll move now on to another project just down the road on Relivo Market, a project by a student called Izzy Watson. The site here lies just down from our sites on this kind of corner, this kind of almost public square in Relivo Market. It sits facing onto a school, and previous projects in the site have been rejected because they block the sunlight from the school. But this project really tries to work with the school, literally lurching and kind of climbing over into the walls of it. It's a weaving workshop, and it's intended to bring craft back to London, something that's been lost. So the building is covered in a weave, essentially. The whole building is a big, is just made of weave, and over time will grow and change through different colors and different textures and different fabrics. It's also a space that is recognizing children and young people in public spaces. It's a space that is intended to have kids playing on it, have kids weaving into it, but at the same time, it's also very complementary to adults. It's a spectacle because of its uniqueness, and as a result, it's able to attract all sorts of demographics into public spaces. However, the building, although it may be, the drawings may be covered in the weaving, the building itself is also technically impeccably designed with axisymmetric drawings, which show its structure here exploded out. But then obviously the life of the building is then drawn onto it and built up onto the drawings. She's also done some interior perspectives, which show this even better. As she literally weaves into the building, she literally constructs life into the building onto photographs of the models. And this very direct relationship between drawing and the construction of the building and the life of the building. It means that the drawings are really able to show the building off, and they're really able to show that kind of life that it brings, far more than a realistic render would. But the building overall, it brings into question what's important in public spaces, who is respected in public spaces, and also what makes it, what should a building be made of? How far should a building reflect its internal program? Should a building go as far as this to literally show itself on its exterior, weaved all over its program, by direct, and with a direct relationship to its facades and its exterior. Again, moving down the market again to site 8. Over here to site 8, with a project that focuses on the market stalls of Ready Road Market. The market stalls in Ready Road Market are these very standard units, these box steel units, which are used across all the market stalls generally, and they're so common in the market that there's even grown a small kind of backroom trading of market stall parts. So the building is stealing from the structure of the market stall and stealing from those kind of hapdash components that plug into those market stalls. You can see in the models, the building is constructed with this kind of very clear, very much expressed steel superstructure into which the kind of functions of the building are plugged in. The building is also really trying to express its want to preserve the fabric of the city. It's very clearly elevated above the existing shop, wanting in no way to disturb any of the buildings around it. It wants to continue the city fabric while still developing up and densifying the area. It really, again, brings into question taste level in architecture. Should we be referencing the brick of the building next door, or should we be referencing the small shop with a Leica mobile sign below, or the busy hapdash market stalls around? Should we be referencing contemporary life, or kind of a historical backdrop to which most people don't really notice and don't pay attention to? And although the building is done in kind of, a quite reserved palette, it still has a level of excitement. It's energetic, despite its reservedness, with a staircase kind of excitedly wrapping around it like an oil rig, and the canopies copied from the market stalls, extruding out. The building also tries to become in sync with the rhythm of the market. As the market opens up by day, the building closes by night. But as the market stall kind of goes away and the market stalls go to be repaired, the building opens up like the market does in the day, canopies opening out, market stalls being lifted up, a whole buzz of activity at the kind of pinnacle of the market. Remember, its site is at the entrance from Dalston Kingsland, one of the main accesses into the market. Now moving on to some work outside of first year, and some work from an undergraduate unit, Unit 0, by a third year student. The unit systems in the Bartlett are vertical, mixed between second and third years, and then fourth and fifth years. This third year work by Rebecca Honey explores the waterworks at Hampstead, thinking about the picturesqueness of the landscape, but also the need to monitor and the need to record the changing environment because of climate change in London, and the impending water crisis that is arriving in London, and finding a way to kind of place the aesthetics of that recording at a central point in the project, so that as people see the building, the aesthetic and the industry of it is extremely clear. As you can see, the building is very clearly a piece of infrastructure, with pipe bursting out both from the building and in the lake. However, the drawings are clearly intending to present a level of picturesqueness, kind of stealing from the picturesque movements, the romantics. There are definite notes of a Turner sunset in here, with the oranges prevalent through the project. The building is trying to present infrastructure as something pretty, something to be adored, something to be loved, and not hated. It places infrastructure in a position of kind of glorification, in a position of a monument, in a position of something where people will look at it and they will think about what that building is doing, and they will think about the need to record the water cycle, the impending water crisis in London. It's the power of the aesthetics of architecture to really advertise questions, and bring into question functions of the world, what's going on in the world, politics of the world. Having a lake filled with kind of a flock of recording instruments, kind of beautifully reflected in the water, is an image which I'm sure would not be hated, but I'm sure in time especially would learn to be loved, and would just be a part of the landscape, and a necessary part of the landscape, in order to prevent a climate crisis. Now moving on to some postgraduate work, which takes the kind of very exaggerated drawings which I've shown so far, but to another level. The first project, Unit 13, is looking at the idea of alternate realities in the future, and thinking about and thinking about how our physical environment will change as our visual environment is taken over by a digital realm. This first drawing really shows well the possibilities of a augmented reality. When you're seeing a digital reality that's kind of mapped onto the physical world, aesthetics and visuals can be completely personal and therefore can kind of are completely free to do what they want. A plane becomes a dragon, a bus becomes an elephant. And because of this, there's no planning and there's no need to kind of debate whether something should fit in. If someone wants something to fit in, they can do it as such, but otherwise they can kind of have a world in which they want and they want to see. It's a completely personal experience. However, that also brings into question what the physical environment that kind of supports this will be. And this project really tries to address this, thinking of the balcony as this kind of point of observation and this point at which you connect visually to the world and you connect, not necessarily physically, but you connect digitally to the world. And also the idea of the billboard and the idea of advertising and what we see and what is shown to us. And in an earlier project, plugging into Robin Hood Gardens, plugging in new adaptations to make the building more suitable or to kind of, I guess, update the building and retrofit it for modern life. Most interestingly is the kind of plugging in of the detached house, which kind of links to what became the demise of estates such as Robin Hood Gardens, with the right to buy scheme implemented by Thatcher because of her want for home ownership and her want for everyone to live in a detached or semi-detached house. And by plugging this into Robin Hood Gardens, it's almost bringing life back to density. It's bringing life back to verticality in England, and bringing life back, importantly, to social housing estates and bringing attention to social housing estates, which are definitely being forgotten in the UK. And also the drawings themselves are very clearly trying to express themselves, express the idea of new adaptations, with all the components falling and flying in from the sky, the idea of a need for more circulation and more places of interaction, with the kind of bright orange staircases poking in and out, and kind of carving up the building. And finally, a project from Unit 22, which is kind of taking all of these elements and taking them into a slightly more contemporary context of Extinction Rebellion, and protest, especially in European cities, in London, and the power of protest structures, and proving a point and showing a message. Oh, that's the wrong project. The project, if I can find it. The project is literally called A Spectacular. It's a theatre of protest, it's a theatre of rebellion. The structures are all there in order to advertise the protest and make it clear that we are in a state of protest, and also to advertise the kind of agendas of a green revolution. You can first kind of see this very clear retrofitting of Nelson's column, this kind of taking over to make it a radio station, to kind of make it a radio tower, like the BT tower, but instead on a beloved and important monument. And it kind of shows architecture's power. It shows architecture's power. I mean, it shows that Nelson's column is a piece of architecture at the end of the day, which England is known for, and Britain is known for, is known world over for it, and thereby by retrofitting it, and by taking over that structure, by taking over that piece of architecture which already holds a piece of power, whatever piece of architecture you attach onto that already holds importance. It must hold an important message if it's doing that, simply because it's been able to do that, and because it's been placed in that position. It's replacing the kind of colonialist ideas of the past with new ideas of kind of a green revolution that we really need for the climate crisis. Over here, you can also see this kind of barraging of the Canadian embassy, a statement, not a kind of barraging in a negative way, but kind of a want to enter into it because of Canada's policies on climate migration, in grave contention to the UK's current policies, and much of the kind of slowly moving towards the far right in Europe. It very clearly is this architectural statement that the British government is doing something wrong, with these kind of cranes winching people up into the embassy, saving them from the evictions of the UK. And next to it are these kind of almost medieval barrage equipment, which is intended to advertise to the few remaining motorists that exist in this reality that they shouldn't be driving, that they should be walking, getting the bus, public transport. This structure here is trying to advertise the kind of ideas of growing, the ideas of cycling. In a structure, it's this kind of very clear piece of manifesto in architecture. And the whole aesthetics of the project are not trying to necessarily be pretty. They are simply what they are. They are certainly spectacular, and they are certainly a sight to behold. But they are messy, and they're totally okay to be messy. They're totally okay to be kind of slapdash. They're totally okay not to be a piece of perfection, because it doesn't need to be a piece of perfection. In fact, by leaving it kind of rougher and in a more kind of pure form, it's able to still express the kind of excitement which lies kind of in the almost the energy and the vibe that comes from a piece of architecture, which I think is something that is often again forgotten. The kind of spaces of a great cathedral or the spaces of a Roman ruin, they are able to project a message, project a kind of aura from them, which transcends the design of the architecture, and that is again something missing. Architecture is failing to infuse excitement in the public, whereas I think structures such as this really would. They are places of movement and dynamism, of activity, of life. They don't need to kind of have perfect shadow gaps to be exciting. People just want fun, they want activity, they want life, they want something that makes them question the world. They want something that makes them think about what is going on, and that's something that this architecture, and I think all the architecture that I've shown you really tries to do and really tries to question, is what is architecture's power? What is the kind of, how far can we push architecture? What is the boundary of what is possible, beyond just pure parametricism, or beyond how far can we take historic preservation of a certain brick type. It really is about how can we preserve life, how can we preserve the city life, how can we preserve the city fabric, and how can we kind of grow and adapt it, and keep it living from what it is, not what it was a few hundred years ago. But yeah, that's the tour. And if you've had any questions, I will have been in the live chat, and please leave them, and I should be able to answer them. Thanks.